Look in the mirror right now. Your skin has a color. You probably never chose it, never think about it, never question it. But the real answer behind that color is far stranger than you were ever taught in school. It is not about geography. It is not simply about the sun. It is about a war that has been fought inside your skin for over 1 million years, between two things your body desperately needs and cannot have both of at once. Your ancestors did not start out looking like you. Every human being alive today descended from ancestors who lived in Africa, and the evidence suggests something surprising. Those ancestors were not dark-skinned because of tradition or culture. They were dark-skinned because they had lost something first. Around 2 million years ago, something happened to the human body. Hair disappeared. Not all at once, but steadily, across millions of years, early hominins lost the thick body hair that covered other primates. Why? Because your ancestors were becoming endurance hunters. They were chasing prey for hours across open grassland, and a body covered in fur cannot cool itself fast enough to survive that kind of heat. So the hair went. And when the hair went, the skin underneath was suddenly exposed directly to the equatorial sun for the first time in the history of that lineage. That exposure created a brand new problem. A problem that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with survival. The sun's ultraviolet radiation does something invisible and dangerous. It breaks down a molecule called folate, which your body needs to build DNA and to develop a healthy fetus during pregnancy. Without enough folate, embryos fail. Nervous systems fail to form properly. In a world without fur, unprotected skin left every human vulnerable to this quiet, invisible collapse. This is where the strange part begins. Your body developed a shield. Melanin, the pigment that darkens skin, acts like a natural sunscreen. It absorbs ultraviolet radiation before it can shred the folate your cells depend on. The anthropologist Nina Jablonski spent decades studying this exact mechanism, and her research helped show that dark skin near the equator was not a cosmetic trait. It was a life-or-death adaptation, protecting fertility itself. So picture it. A hairless body under a relentless equatorial sun. Natural selection did not hesitate. Darker skin protected reproduction. Lighter skin, in that environment, would have meant fewer surviving children, generation after generation. Within a relatively short evolutionary window, deeply pigmented skin became the default setting for humanity. For a long time, that was simply what a human looked like. Dark skin, everywhere, because everyone still lived close to the equator. Then people started walking. Human populations began migrating out of Africa tens of thousands of years ago, moving north into Europe and Asia, into regions with far less direct sunlight, especially during long winters. And that same protective shield, the one that had saved lives near the equator, suddenly became a liability. Here is the twist almost nobody expects. Melanin was still blocking ultraviolet radiation, exactly as it was designed to. But in these northern latitudes, there was barely enough ultraviolet light to begin with. And your skin needs a small amount of that radiation for something else entirely. Producing vitamin D. Vitamin D is not optional. It builds bone. It supports the immune system. Without it, children develop rickets, a disease that softens and bends bones, sometimes fatally distorting the pelvis, in ways that made childbirth itself more dangerous. So now a second silent war was underway. Not too little folate protection. Too little vitamin D production. The body could not have it both ways. Not in low sunlight environments. So, gradually, over thousands of years, in these specific regions, natural selection began favoring something almost unthinkable for a species that had been uniformly dark-skinned for over 1 million years. It began favoring less melanin, paler skin. Skin thin enough to let in just enough weak northern sunlight to keep producing vitamin D. Researchers studying ancient DNA, including work led by geneticist Ian Matheson, found something that stunned a lot of people when it was first published. Light skin did not spread gradually and uniformly across Europe as populations moved north. It appeared in different populations at different times, sometimes strikingly late, arriving through separate genetic mutations that spread independently once they proved useful. Some populations in parts of Europe were still relatively dark-skinned as recently as 7 or 8,000 years ago, long after farming had already begun. Does that surprise you? It should, because it means skin color was never a single story unfolding at one steady pace. It was many separate evolutionary experiments, running in parallel, each one responding to the same brutal equation. How much sun protection can you afford to lose before your bones start failing? How much sun protection can you afford to keep before your children stop developing properly? There is another twist inside the twist. Not every population living far from the equator became pale. Some Arctic populations, for example, retained darker skin despite living in extremely low sunlight environments because their traditional diets, rich in fish and marine mammals, already supplied enormous amounts of vitamin D directly. When food solves the problem, skin does not have to. This tells you something important. Skin color was never a ranking. It was never a hierarchy of adaptation. It was a local solution to a local math problem, balancing folate protection against vitamin D production, tuned precisely to sunlight and diet in each specific place. Dark skin near the equator was not primitive. Pale skin in the north was not superior. Both were equally sophisticated answers to opposite versions of the exact same survival puzzle. And here's where it gets personal. This entire multi-million-year saga is still written directly onto your body today. Every time you get a sunburn, that is folate protection failing in real time, ultraviolet radiation breaking through a shield that was calibrated for an ancestor who lived somewhere else, at some other point in this long unfolding story. Every time a doctor recommends a vitamin D supplement in winter, that is the other half of the ancient equation, still unresolved, still playing out in modern light-deprived indoor life. You are not separate from this history. You are the current chapter of it. The exact tone of your skin is a message, encoded across thousands of generations, describing how much sunlight your ancestors could safely absorb without losing either their fertility or their bones. None of it was about beauty. None of it was about culture at first. It was a molecular negotiation between two invisible threats, folate destruction and vitamin D deficiency, played out silently on every human body that has ever walked under open sky. So look in the mirror again. That color was never a coincidence, and it was never a choice. It is a message from your ancestors, written in pigment instead of words, still being read by your own skin every single day.